Hello, this is Michele. This is another day that the Lord has made, and I will rejoice and be glad in it. Okay, uh, we just finished part 10 yesterday, and now we're starting in part 11. I need to rewind a little bit. There was few more things that I remembered that I forgot to talk about. And I'll go ahead and mention now. I know it sounds very juvenile to people from northern states and western states that I call my biological father Daddy, but that's very common in the part of Texas that I grew up in. Well, for the way our family was, everybody called their father Daddy, and especially well, we just kept calling him. We never switched over to Dad like people in the north and stuff do. And anyway, so that's why I call him Daddy, my biological father. So one thing I wanted to back up about was when I had been in the mental hospital in Denver, and I had gotten out by telling that supervisor guy that I was there with black magic, but I was still doing the outpatient program where maybe 20 or so outpatients that had been there before and were now out of living in that mental hospital were coming on a daily basis, Monday through Friday, for a group therapy. And each of us had a therapist assigned to us. And I mentioned how I had found out that I was not legally bound to keep coming. But before I left them, there was a night that they had for a family therapy, and our parents were invited to come to the therapy, and it was in the evening. And my parents had two young girls at this time, and so just Daddy came. And they were going around we were all sitting around in a circle, and the therapist would ask the parents questions and ask the patients questions. I don't really remember what the questions were anymore. I just remember the part that was traumatic for me, which is that there was something I had been asked and I answered, and my daddy was sitting right kind of across from me in the circle, and I had said whatever I said. I don't remember anymore now. And I finished with, "It's okay, Daddy, I know you love me." And when I said that, my biological father answered with, "I can't say I love you. I care about you." And when he did that, apparently some of the therapists were really giving him the evil eye. And he looked at them and he said, "Well, she's 21 and she's pretty and she's white and she ought to be married by now." That's about all that's all I remember him saying. But what really got me was that he had just told me in front of what seemed like 20 or 30 people, they were all strangers, told them that he didn't love me. And he was the one that I always thought was the only one that loved me. And so this shook me. And sometimes I kind of knew he didn't care that much, but I really clung on to a belief that he loved me. And so that was just really, really hard for him to just come right out and say that he couldn't say that he loved me. And I was very humiliated for him to say that in front of everyone as well. And this is when I think for the first time I realized that I cannot look for love from my family family is not the answer to get the love that I so need and crave and want. And also, around this time is when I started being supportive of smoking marijuana. I don't remember exactly when I switched about that, but I think it was, I don't know, maybe it was the fact that they wanted me to take those psychoactive drugs and I wasn't taking those, but I still wanted, I guess I'd already started being supportive of weed actually before I went in there because I was smoking that opiated marijuana. And I still wanted an escape. I still didn't like being alive. I was not as suicidal as I had been, but I was pretty depressed. I was not in a very good situation, and so now I wanted to smoke it. I just felt like, I remember telling the group therapy, well, it makes me feel better. I think the therapists were kind of trying to talk us out of smoking it. So anyway, kind of weird how I went from breaking up with a guy because he wouldn't quit smoking it, and then within a year, I don't know, within a year or so, I was back to smoking it myself. The other thing that I wanted to get back to, I think there was one other thing. Oh, yeah. So, back when I had run away from home and gone to Austin, and I was staying with a couple, very nice friends. They had an extra room, which they used as a guest room, and I was invited to stay there. This is right after I turned 17, and I got a job at a fast food Mexican restaurant. It's no longer there, but it was called Taco Toro, and it was either right where Milto's Pizza came to be or right next to it on Guadalupe. And one of the things that I had to sign when I got that job there was that if I quit in less than 6 months, that I would be paid only 50 cents an hour instead of whatever they were paying me, which is probably, wasn't much over $1 an hour, but I don't remember how much it was. And anyhow, so while I was working there and living with my friends, who I'll call, what am I call them? I'll call them Hank and Annie. I'll call them Hank and Annie. And they were so generous and nice to let me live there and to offer me a place to live there while I tried to get on my feet. And this, of course, was before my parents came and my mother invited me to come back and live in Denver again. And we had these two friends from College Station who, one of them I didn't know as well, but he was really well known in our group of friends as being somebody who was highly intelligent. He was probably somebody who made straight A's in school and all of that. And I wasn't close to him, but I knew him well, pretty well. And the other one was a guy who I did not know as well, but my little bit of experience with him, getting to know him in Austin, he was somebody who really made me feel good. Whenever I would come around, he would act like it was oh, Michele, like he acted like it was exciting and great. And I just can't tell you how good that made me feel. Living a very depressive life, it was so nice to have somebody act like, like it was such a great thing to see me. And I don't know what drugs he was taking, if it was the same thing I was, but I believe I was taking a lot of speed, what we called speed at that time, which is like what today is called meth. And and just taking it orally. And the main thing for me was that it caused me to just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And I'd stay up a lot of hours and then crash. That's what we called it, when you just really fell asleep and you just fell hard asleep. That was one of the things that crashing meant. The other thing that crashing meant was staying at somebody's house and spending the night. That would be crashing at their house or their pad or whatever. We didn't call it a pad, but anyway. He was really dear to me. He was just such a nice guy. His name was Mike. And so Mike and this guy came over, and they had just gotten involved in Scientology. And it was so weird because it was so obvious that they came over just to tell us about Scientology and to tell us that we should get involved in it. And the thing was, just that by itself, probably it just wouldn't have bothered me, except that they were kind of acting so strange. They didn't act like their normal selves. It was kind of like they had a script and they were very much controlling the conversation. And it was just, me and the couple that I was staying with, we all felt after they left, when we talked about it, I said, wow, it was like they were acting like robots. It's like they didn't have their own minds anymore. It was very upsetting. And I learned that Scientology had a little place where people could come and have a little introduction thing, and they would give a demonstration of using their what they called their auditing equipment to quote unquote clear people. This was sort of their big thing, to get clear, and it was supposed to like take away your traumas, and it's their, part of their whole game of how they pull people in. And we didn't like Scientology. We didn't like what it did to our friends. And we didn't like how they had an attitude that if you don't get into Scientology, we're not going to be your friends anymore. And so I learned about this, and I found out from someone who'd gone to one of those introductory classes that they always ask for a volunteer. And then the volunteer will go up and get on the auditing machine. And I felt pretty sure that I could trick the machine. Because I had a real strong, very emotional person, and I could turn those emotions on and off at will if I wanted to. And so anyway, I went to the introductory class one evening, and I knew they were going to ask for a volunteer, and I was sitting near the front, and I shot my arm up, and I got to be the volunteer, and he put me on the auditing equipment, and he would ask me to think about something that was really traumatic and upsetting in my life. And instead, I would think of something really, really peaceful, and I'd, kind of go with the feeling of being peaceful. And then he would say, so what are you remembering? And then I would say something that sounded traumatic. I don't remember what examples I gave. And then I'd go the opposite way. If he told me to think of something really calm and peaceful, then I would remember things really upsetting and chaotic and extreme and whatever, just really bad stuff. And the needle was not doing what it was supposed to do, and I just knew it was working. I could feel, I just knew that I could control that machine. And sure enough, by the time we'd gone a while, I looked back. I opened my eyes and I looked back, and half of the class had wandered out into the hallway. I think they were pretty bored, and they saw that it wasn't working. And so the demonstration was aborted, and he didn't even finish talking because it was kind of all everybody's out in the hallway, and I went out because to the hallway to my friend that I was staying with. He was going to come pick me up, and it was time. It was about time to be picked up, so I was going to go out. I went out to the parking lot, and he was out there, and oh boy, he was like fit to be tied. He was really upset because he had come a few minutes earlier to come pick me up, and he had walked into the building, and he said, I'm here to pick up my friend, and I don't remember the exact situation, except basically they just said, you can't come in here right now. And he said, well, yes, I can. I'm just coming to get my friend. She's here. She's over in this introductory class. And they wouldn't take no for an answer. They wouldn't let him stay in the building. And they started saying code numbers to each other, kind of like policemen do. Like, we've got a 311 or whatever. They said some code. And then several of them started coming at him and forcing him out the front door. And so that was pretty creepy and weird. And so that was my introduction to Scientology. I never liked it. I never will. The more I've learned about it, the more I realize it's when you get up, it's like walking in to become a slave, an actual slave of Scientology. You go in there and they immediately start charging you ridiculous rates just to have that machine be used on you, and then they start judging you and making you do all kind of stuff and work long hours and put you in debt and have you sign oaths, and it's just terrible. There's a lot of, nowadays anybody can look up, and there's a lot of books out now by people who have escaped that organization. And there's also people who had been higher up, and one of them being the son of L. Ron Hubbard, who was the founder of Scientology. And I can tell you, the more you learn about it, the more you realize that at the very top it is extremely satanic. It is a very satanic organization, in my opinion. And they're when somebody leaves, the more they know, the more they will stalk them. They will make their lives miserable. You are not allowed to criticize Scientology. It is really, and it's just a travesty that they're able to be called a church in the United States. They don't even have to pay taxes. And, well, anyway, I won't go on and on about Scientology. I'm not an expert on it, but except for I would just warn people, stay away from that thing. Stay away from Scientology. They pretend you're helping save the world if you join them. And they take advantage of people's vulnerability, and they just immediately start brainwashing you and programming you, including giving you lack of sleep, sometimes lack of food, and a lot of punishment. I mean, it's really bad. It's not good. So anyway, and sadly, the one guy that I just had been so dear to me, and so many years went by, I tried to contact him. And of course, if you try to contact an old friend through Scientology, they might pretend like they're going to try to help you, but they won't. They will never connect you with anybody in Scientology. They consider anybody who's not in Scientology to be their enemy. They treat us, everybody who's not in Scientology, like they're the devil. And it's... Anyway, so many years have gone by. It's been, at least I'd say, around 50 years since I ever saw him. And a couple of years ago, I went through a real deep dive trying to find him. and I think I located where he was living. And but then there's a group now uh, of people who they used to be Scientologists, and they help each other. And I can't remember the name of that group, but when I come across it, I'll mention it in a future video in case anybody wants to contact them. If you know somebody who was in Scientology, and you want to try to find out, are they still there? Did they get out? Whatever. And anyway, unfortunately, what I found out is that he passed away, I guess a couple few years ago. And okay, so now I'm going to get back to where I left off in part 10, which is I had moved back to Austin. At this point, it was after I had moved out of the ashram. I was also had quit doing the modeling, and so at this point I was 22 or 23. I was about that age, and I had been working for Kelly Girl. I'd been a law secretary in Denver, and I'd worked for Kelly Girl. So I worked for Kelly Girl in Austin while I was looking for a job. And this one job I had was at a government place. I don't think I'll name it. And he was a lawyer there. His name was Tony. He was one of their attorneys. And took one look at him, and I thought he was so attractive. He was obviously a lot older than me. I think when it came down to it, he was close to 20 years older than me. But he was just gorgeous. And one of the things I had learned while I was in the ashram, where we had vows of celibacy, is the best way to not try to seduce somebody or anything, to just try to make sure to keep it clean, keep it non-sexual, was that if I ever did get a crush on anybody, I would avoid them. I would just stay away from them. And it worked. That worked really well. So when I saw this guy Tony, that's how I thought, okay, I'm just going to have to ignore him. And so when I would have wanted to look at him and stuff like that, instead I would just look away and try to act like he wasn't there and pretend he wasn't there. The way this office was, there was a whole sort of almost like it was indoors, but it was almost like a little courtyard with all the secretaries for all the different people being in that little courtyard, and then the offices surrounded us in a semicircle, and all had windows, a lot of them had windows and all that. So you would see the different people like him when they would come out of their office, and they'd walk by you, or you would see them through a window if they were in an office. And so I immediately started ignoring him. And unfortunately, that piqued his interest. And he ended up kind of inviting me on a sort of a date. And he explained to me that he was married, but they had an open marriage. That was a big thing, I guess, in the mid-70s. That's when a lot of people started getting into what they called open marriages, which basically meant your husband or your wife, both of you, were allowed to have sexual relations with people outside of the marriage. And again, I was still immoral about sexuality, and this was new to me, but I was open. I was always open to something new, try something new, whatever. And he took me by his house where he lived. It's a big house. And he said he was taking me there to introduce me to his wife. My understanding was he was doing this so that I would see that this is all out in the open. I'm not sneaking out. You're not having a dirty, adulterous affair. This is something that's okay with my wife. That was the kind of message I got, even though she wasn't there. So we stayed there for only a few minutes, and then he took me out to some place in the woods. We were just walking around and talking, and we ended up over at my little apartment. And sexuality started happening, and I wanted to stop early in it to go put in a diaphragm so I wouldn't get pregnant. And he didn't want me to do that, and he said that he knew how to withdraw in time so that I surely would not get pregnant. And so I believed him. And in this way, I got pregnant for the first time on the very first date that I had with this guy. It was very upsetting because soon after that, when I would go to work at that Kelly Girl job, he was suddenly not there. He never came back during the rest of the days that I was there, which wasn't much longer, maybe a week, but he just disappeared. And I took that as an affront. I took that as a rejection. And during that time, while I was feeling rejected, I didn't yet know I was pregnant till I started getting morning sickness. And then found out that I was pregnant. And I was really upset because I had just moved there and I didn't know hardly anyone. I had just gotten my job at the translation company, and I was not prepared to have a baby, and I was still not considering, I did not consider a fetus to be a human being yet. That seemed to be what I believed from what little I knew, and I did not consider it to be murder to kill a baby in the womb. I thought it was just, I went with the whole thing. It's my body, my choice, and the main thing was I really wanted to have a baby. I always wanted a baby. I wanted a husband, and I wanted children. And but I didn't want a child this way, especially when at that point I was feeling hatred for Tony because of the way he had just disappeared on me. He ghosted me is what he did. He ghosted me. And how am I going to go tell some guy who I slept with the very first time we went out? He didn't even buy me dinner. And why should he even believe that he was the father? Because I had acted so unscrupulously, and I was so humiliated, and so I didn't tell him. I didn't think I should tell him because I couldn't handle the humiliation of him trying to say, no, it's not me. And this was before I knew about things like DNA. I don't know if they even had DNA going on much yet at that point. And so I just made the decision to have an abortion. And because, well, the way I felt was this: if I have a baby, I need to give him a safe home. And I need to be, I need to give him a home, not just have him brought up in childcare somewhere, and I also didn't want to have a baby that I would not love fully, and I was feeling so much hatred at that point for who would have been the biological father that it made me feel like I hated that baby. That's terrible, isn't it? But I was telling you before, how the more sins you do and you haven't repented of any of them, you might be sorry about something, but see, when you repent to Jesus, who died on the cross for our sins, and then went to the grave for 3 days and was resurrected, that blood that he bled at the cross willingly, it was God's blood. It was a sacrifice he made for us, and that's the only thing that can cleanse us of our sins. And he only can do that for us when we will repent, be sorry for what we did, and be sorry enough also that we're willing to turn away from our sin. And sins should be plural because we all have more than one. And which is probably, that's an understatement. And so those sins just keep piling up, and it keeps making our heart harder, and we become more wicked. We don't even realize it. I didn't realize I was becoming a more wicked person. I was, but I didn't recognize it. I was just becoming more and more blind. And so anyway, I pulled together the money somehow and had the abortion. It was in the days, abortions had become legal, I think, just a couple years before, just very recently. And that's one of the reasons I really, really wish they had never been made legal, because I know myself well enough to know that if it was illegal, that would have changed a lot of ways I would have done things. I would have been much more careful not to get pregnant, for one thing. And I also would not be willing to go to a backstreet abortionist kind of thing. That would have scared me too much. I would have had the baby. I probably would have put it up for adoption, which wouldn't be the best thing, but at least I would have not had the baby be murdered. So that's one of my big sins, one of my many sins, and I wish I could tell you I didn't have an abortion again, but I can't tell you that. Anyway, so I had that abortion, and I was open about it. I've always been a pretty open person about things, and I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. I became aware that some people thought I did do something wrong when I talked about it at work. People told me that so-and-so can't believe you did that, and things like that. But I never saw Tony again, except for one time. I was near a place called Swedish Hill. I don't think it's there anymore, or Swedish Hill Bakery. And I didn't usually go there. And I was walking down the street. I was with a friend who knew about what had happened with me and Tony. And I saw him. He was kind of behind us on the sidewalk, maybe, I don't know, half a block behind us, something like that. And I saw him, and I said to her, "That's him!" And she looked back, and you could see his body kind of jerk, like he knew that he was being pointed out, and that I'm sure he heard me say, "That's him." And we did not talk or anything. She and I just hurried off to her car, and that was the last time I ever saw him. And he never knew. I never told him. So anyway, there's the part. something I want. Okay. So, okay, so now we can move on. I'm not sure. Let's see, where was I on part 10? Oh, so I guess I just move on. I just keep moving on with the time. Okay. So after I'd been in Austin working at that translation company for I don't know how long, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. It was very, I really liked it. It was very free form because we were technically contract workers. They could not tell us what time to show up to work and what time to leave. But the motivation was that I was getting paid by the word. And if I didn't type enough words, I didn't make enough money, and I really needed to be there quite a lot in order to type enough words to make. I think I made an average of $700 a month. And but that was a penny a word. And it was technical typing. It was hard to go fast. You'd have to stop and take out the little elements out of the typewriter whenever you had to put a scientific symbol. You'd have to take out the element that had the letters on it and put in the one with the symbols, and then type in the symbols, take that off, put the letters back on. So it was a lot of intensive work there. But I didn't have a certain time I had to check in, and a lot of people worked there till very late at night. In fact, the lady who ran the place, she and her husband lived on the third floor. I think it was the third floor. It was the second floor or the third floor. Anyway, there was a second floor that turned into offices, and I think maybe there was a third floor that she and her husband lived in. And anyway, so you could go there. Most people, I don't think most people worked in the middle of the night, but I didn't ever work that late. And maybe people didn't. Anyway, I was free to come and go. It was also around people who smoked marijuana, and in time some of them were even doing cocaine. And I was smoking marijuana a lot, especially, well, let's see. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. I wasn't smoking marijuana at first all that much, if at all. The first maybe 6 months I worked there. I had the abortion, and then I was remembering Max. Max was the guy that I left to move into the ashram a few years earlier. And when I said before that he seemed to kind of go insane when I left him, the reason I say that is because of he used to have hair, really long hair, probably seemed like 6 inches below his shoulder. It was really thick, almost black hair. And he was very proud of his hair. And after I left him, he had his hair cut really short. And it was reported to me that he had been shaving the hair off of his arms. And so that's why I thought he went kind of crazy. And he tried to stop me from leaving him. He acted like he thought I was crazy to leave him. I remember him shaking me by the arms and saying, "What are you doing? You can't do this." But I was determined. Anyway, so my mind went back to Max. And I was remembering how when I had been with him, how we just never even had arguments, and I thought we were so happy. You know, it was pretty good. I felt like he loved me. And I found a way to get in touch with him. He had moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I think I wrote him a letter. That's how I got in touch. And then he wrote me back and sent me a gift for my birthday, and I invited him, that he could come visit if he ever wanted to. And it wasn't long before he did. He hitchhiked over to Austin and stayed with me for a short while. And we seemed to fall in love all over again. And but we were really falling in lust, at least for me. I thought it was love. It was mostly lust, and that by this time I was able to feel lust. When I was younger, for a long time, I was just not a really sexual being. I just wasn't. But I think the more you have immoral sex, moral or immoral, I don't know, because I never did it morally in my younger years, so I can't tell you about that. But for me, it seemed like the more I experienced sex, the more I would start to feel a sex drive. And I remember him telling me that I had a much stronger sex drive than other women. I didn't believe him, but later I realized that was probably true. Anyway, he had come to visit, and then he went back to Albuquerque, and he and I wanted to be together again, and so he invited me to move in with him in Albuquerque. So I quit my job, and I think I took a bus. I think I took a Greyhound bus with whatever I could fit in my suitcases. And I moved to Albuquerque in with him. He had 2 male roommates that seemed to be pretty nice guys. And it was not good. He had changed. At least to me, it seemed like he had really changed. He used to be so nice, and now he was kind of abusive. He was emotionally abusive and a little bit physically abusive. It was more the threat of being physically abusive than actually being physically abusive, but you can feel it when it's there. And he would belittle me a lot, which he never used to do. He would say things to make me feel small. And but I kept ignoring that. I just kept focusing on, I'm so attracted to him, and he's still really attracted to me, and I don't know. It was the only thing I was clinging on to. And I remember I think it was the first night I was there, they were having a little party in the front room. We rarely spent time in that front room, but that night there were some people over having a party. And Max and I had gone to his bedroom. We were kind of making out, laying on his bed making out. And a guy came to the door, and he opened it, looked in at us, and he said something like, I can't remember what he said, but it was something to the effect that, you're letting another woman pull the wool over your eyes, or it was something to that effect. And Max got up, he walked up to the doorway, and he just went, pow, and he hit him really, he punched him, and then he closed the door. I had never even seen anybody do anything like that before. And so that was a big red flag that I ignored. And while I was there, somehow somehow I got convinced to take LSD some more. I had taken it, by that time I'd probably taken it 3 or 4 times. And every time I took LSD, I would feel so guilty, and I always wanted to quit. It was so weird. It was like I wanted so badly to quit, and yet there was another part of me that just couldn't seem to resist. And I remember one time, actually I think twice, I had taken LSD with him, and it was so weird because I didn't hallucinate much on LSD or any drugs unless it had a lot of poison in it. One time when it had strychnine in it. Oh, there's a whole story I forgot to tell, but it was a night that there was a whole lot of strychnine in it when I took it when I was 15. And I was hallucinating what for me was a lot. I would see like a picture of Paul McCartney on the wall and his eyes came down like a waterfall, things like that. Usually I didn't see hallucinations. It's just the way my body's chemistry is, I guess. I don't tend to hallucinations. And anyway, a couple times I would be talking with him on LSD, and his face would morph, and he'd look like the devil. To me, he looked like a devil, the devil. Whatever, it wasn't like he had horns or anything, but if you just take away the horns and it just sounded, I don't know how to explain it, but it was kind of like his face would transform and he would look like the devil. And that was scary. And then also during that time I was living with him, I learned that he was really into Aleister Crowley, or some people say Crowley. And Aleister Crowley was a very wicked man. He did a lot of very wicked things, and up to and including human sacrifices in satanic rituals. He was extremely anti-God, anti-Jesus, and creepy and cruel and proud of it. Somehow he had a lot of money. I guess, I don't know if it was from it must have been from his family, and he had aristocratic friends in England, which is, I believe that's where he was born. Back then they called it England, now it's called Great Britain. And I just don't want to go into detail about him. Anybody who looks him up, all you need is the abbreviated version. But he also went and wrote a book called The Book of the Law, which he wrote laws that were very anti-Jesus, that were the opposite of what the Bible would tell you to do. And one of them was, like in following Jesus, we say the Lord's Prayer. And in the Lord's Prayer, we say, Thy will be done. And what we're saying when we sing that is, Lord, your will be done, not mine. In fact, that's what Jesus said to the Father God. He being part of 3 aspects of God. He's God himself, the Son. There's the Father, that is Spirit, and the Holy Spirit, and they're all 3 persons in one. And it's something we can't really understand, just like we can't understand God's thoughts. His thoughts are not our thoughts, and his ways are not our ways. And he explains that to us in Isaiah. I think it's Isaiah 55. It might be 55:10 or 55:11. And anyway, he expressed in some of all kinds of satanic ideas and practices in his books, and He wanted to be the devil's highest assistant or something like that. I don't remember exactly. And terrible. He had terrible, terrible influences on people, including Jack Parsons, who's the person who started the JPL lab in Pasadena, California. As a rocket scientist, I believe he was using some of the fallen angel technology. He had no real academic learning in engineering and things, but he was very much into ritual magic, and Aleister Crowley, and L. Ron Hubbard was his friend for a while. L. Ron Hubbard being the founder of Scientology. It's just terrible. Anyway, I didn't know all that about Aleister Crowley at the time, but the few things I learned about him was what a creep he was. He was just a real creep. He would do things like was in Buckingham Palace once and just peed on the carpet. And another story was a lady that he was introduced to, and back then men used to kiss a woman's hand sometimes when they met them, and he bit her hand instead. And just I would hear things like that, and I just knew what a creep he was, and it really bothered me that Max just loved to read Aleister Crowley. And I would tell him, why do you want to read that? He's so evil, he's so creepy. And I don't understand what his defense was. He was real into science fiction and into Aleister Crowley. Can't get much bigger red flag than that. But as usual, I was just acting like a dumb fool, which I was. I was a dumb fool. And on the good side, that was the first time I learned how to make sourdough bread through someone that I met who was a nice lady. I forgot how to make it later, but while I was making it, that was really fun. I mean, in life, there's the terrible things that happen, and then you have some things that happen that aren't so bad, and it kind of helps you go through it, I guess. Anyway, I didn't like living in Albuquerque. People were very cliquish. It was kind of like if they didn't already know you and they didn't already feel like you were a part of their group, they didn't want to speak. They didn't want to say hello. I was used to more Texan attitude of you say hello to people you don't know on the street. You just walk by and go, hi. You smile and say hi. It wasn't like that in New Mexico. It wasn't like that in Albuquerque. It was like if you were friendly to somebody you didn't know, they looked at you in suspicion. And I'll just kind of leave it at that. And I did LSD again. Every time I did it, I wanted to stop doing it, but he talked me into doing it again while we were there. And after we had moved into our own place, and I really wanted to go back to Austin, and he relented at some point, and we moved back to Austin. We moved to Austin and got a place in Austin, and I started working at that same translation company again, and he didn't really like me he did it in subtle ways. He didn't like me to have other friends. He kind of separated me from my friends, and I can't explain it very well. I can't remember how it all came down exactly. But none of my friends who I knew in Austin, they didn't like him. They didn't want me to be with him. But I felt so bonded to him. I can't really explain why. And oh gosh, there's a whole story I haven't told you about. Is it yet? Is it before or after Tony? Oh, that's after Tony, and I already told you about Tony. Okay, and now we're going into the part, another part I just really don't like remembering. Um, Max always wanted to live. For a while, we lived in an apartment or something. I don't remember where we lived the first time. But he wanted to move and get into a house because he liked to play music all the time and he liked to play it really loud, and you can't do that in an apartment. And in order to get a house, he pretended that I was his wife, and he did not want to get married. I wanted to get married. His attitude was, no, I want to have plenty of money first, and then I can think about getting married. And that was such a blessing. I was so blessed that he did not marry me. I had no idea. I was very upset that he didn't want to get married, that he would put it off to the future. And he would say mean things like, well, you know, if you lose 15 pounds, then I'll marry you. Or, I don't know, imply things like that. And he knew that I was very sensitive about my weight. After I'd quit modeling, I had put on, I think, 20 pounds. And so we were living in that house, and he lived, he made money illegally. He would trade in marijuana. He always had a big grocery sack full of it in the closet. I was a cigarette smoker, and he hated cigarettes, so he made a deal with me. He said, if you will stop smoking cigarettes, you can have all the marijuana to smoke that you want. And I agreed. And I noticed that whenever I smoked marijuana, it would make the whites of my eyes turn very pink. And I did not want to be caught because it was still highly illegal at that time here in Texas. I didn't want to be caught by the wrong person I didn't want to get in trouble with the law. And so, brainiac that I was, and I'm saying that very sarcastically, I decided that I should chain smoke marijuana so that my eyes would always be pink, and that way nobody would suspect anything. If my eyes got pink, they would just think, oh, she always has pink eyes, and it would just be considered normal. And that's how I was. I'd go to work, I'd make sure to smoke some marijuana before I went to work, and then when I would take breaks at work, I would go out in the back. They had a little backyard area. I'd go out there and smoke some more, and the people there, they didn't care. If they ever knew, they didn't care. And for almost 3 years, I was a chain smoker of marijuana. And more time went by, the more I didn't like it, because it did make me feel paranoid, and I don't like feeling paranoid. But I felt powerless to stop smoking, so I kept smoking. And so I would do my job at the translation company, and he didn't get a job. He just sold marijuana, and he started growing psilocybin mushrooms, which he got more money for. We had a special room just in the back of the house that he used just for he'd sterilize the air in there and had all the jars and everything. And so he didn't have a job, but he made money without getting a job. I had a job, and I would, for quite a while, I was trying to get in better shape physically, and I would walk to work, which was, gosh, I think it was over 2 miles. It was pretty far. And I would walk home as well. And wait, that was later. By the time we moved into the house I'm talking about now, I had quit working at the translation company. Some things happened there that were very upsetting to me. One of the the person who became my supervisor there, made a physical lesbian style pass at me, and at the same time had just given me a promotion, and I was totally freaked out about that. And then on top of that, there was a guy that had started working there who was the most handsome guy I'd ever seen. All of the girls there agreed that he was incredibly handsome, and he was considered to be a very smart editor of scientific articles. He was considered like a genius. He had worked at another company that I think it was called Raytheon, but I'm not sure. It was sort of a competitor because we translated technical articles from other languages into English. Anyway, I was made the assistant manager there, and this guy, his name was Clay. He looked like Christopher Reeves, but he was so much more handsome than Christopher Reeves that he made Christopher Reeves look not so handsome. I know that's hard to believe, but that's how handsome he was. But what was so weird was, I'll just give this one example. I don't want to go into a long story about him. But one day, he was talking to me about how he had played strip poker with someone who had been my best friend at that company. And she was Mexican. And he was saying something racist about her. And then he was, I guess he was trying to apologize because I was white. Like, I didn't quite understand, because he and I didn't have a relationship. And then he started slapping himself really hard. And I'd never seen anybody do anything like that. And at that moment, I was convinced that he was psychotic. And between psychotic Clay, my ex-best friend who had, I just won't go into all of that, but it was very painful. Came to a big problem because she was cheating on a boyfriend of hers that I thought was such a good guy, and then when he was out of town for a while, she cheated on him with his best friend, and I just felt terrible about it because of the fact that I was her roommate and I knew about it and I didn't tell anybody, and I just felt terrible about it, and she thought that I was too judgmental to even say anything to her about it. And anyway, our relationship had ended, and so it was just all a big mess. And so once the person who was my supervisor made that pass at me, and then Clay did that psychotic thing, I knew I had to leave. I had to quit. And I hated to do that because I was making more money and I was really good at what I was doing, and it was just a great job. But with the side effects of that job, I couldn't handle. So I quit that job. And then I got a job. I did Kelly Girl again for a while. And then through Kelly Girl, I ended up with a job working for a lawyer who, unbeknownst to me, had been, he had had his, what do they call it? When they reprimand an attorney because he took he had taken bribes. What I found out later, much later, was he had taken bribes and got caught, and his, what do you call it? His ability to be an attorney in Texas was taken away for a certain amount of time. And at the time that someone that I was working for Kelly Girls, one of the attorneys that I worked in his office through Kelly Girl, told this guy